Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Hatman Strikes Back, Daily Boxing News. I think my mic is a bit hot here. Let me turn it down slightly so I don't blow your ears out. What's happening, live chat? We got some boxing topics to cover today. Shout out to everybody locked in. Let's see who we got in here. Askip, big up. Grind, Warts, Kieran, KO Talk, Chili Beef, Typhon. We got Chainsaw, Ben Odom, Askip, Sonia Blade, Tony, Warren Jackson, Striker, Stu the Q, KD versus the World, Ocean Blue, Warren Jackson. What's up? What's up? How you guys feeling? Can you hear me loud and clear? Let me know in the live chat if you can hear me. Are my levels okay? Ryan Amos in the place. Big up. Abraham. All right, Ocean Blue says loud and clear. We got Mark S. Is it Jeshuran? Is that how you pronounce your name? Big up. Yeah, we'll come on to Mario Barrios in a moment. Because, yes, his performance was terrible. But when aren't his performances terrible? Big up Clint Callahan. Did I add you back to the Element group, Clint? I hope I did. Or maybe I didn't see your address posted below any of the posts. I hope I did. If I didn't, I'm going to add you again today. Big up JR. Jimmy, big up KO Talk. He says Eddie cried on the way home. All right, let's get to the topics right away. How many of you guys have seen this? Dana White at the UFC post-show press conference was asked about Eddie Hearn, and he referred to him as the biggest, what substitute word can I use? The biggest box in the world, basically. Box is a euphemism for the P word there that I don't want to say for the sake of the algorithm. Called him the biggest box in the world. And he claimed that the money or the offer that Conor Benn accepted from him could have been matched from Eddie Hearn, but he decided not to. So all of this crying from Hearn and talking about lack of loyalty, etc., according to Dana White, it's a load of BS. He just didn't want to match the offer. Now, Eddie Hearn is known for being a little bit of a penny pincher, truth be told. He doesn't like overpaying fighters these days when he's having to spend his own money. When he was spending somebody else's money, it was okay. When he's spending his own company's money, he don't want to do that. So he routinely loses purse bids, etc. So it wouldn't surprise me if what Dana White is saying is actually true. But then again, it wouldn't surprise me if it was BS. I don't trust Eddie Hearn or Dana White to tell the truth. What do you guys think? Because Eddie Hearn said that he tried to speak to Conor Benn, requested a phone call with him, and Ben declined, said, no, I ain't going to speak to you on the phone. The way Eddie Hearn made it seem, it's as if there was no conversation to see if they could go to the zone, see if they could match the offer, etc. But again, Dana White says otherwise. Who do you guys believe? Big up Galaxy Edits. Chainsaw says, funny, we were talking about loyalty on the previous live. Mark says, Conor Benn and his moral compass strikes again. King James says, Eddie was glazing Dana and thought they were equals for a year or two. Dana has no respect for the Essex car salesman. Damn. Big up the overtrained. He says, promoter back and forth is actually more entertaining for me than fighters, as the fighters are actually going to get it on at some point. Okay. Big up Conor Williams. Conor Williams says, Ben is so unlikable. This might be the first time I've ever backed a promoter. Now, Conor Benn has come out and given his brief side of the story as far as why he's left Eddie Hearn and joined Zuffa Boxing, signed with Dana White. There's been several interviews put out, and the interviewers, it has to be said, are asking very, very softball questions. But to be honest, they almost certainly wouldn't have got the interviews if they hadn't agreed to only ask softball questions. So make of that what you will. There are some people, including Ade Oladipo, shout out to Ade, who are of the view that there's something not right about this whole situation. Something feels off. Eddie's body language and the tone of his voice seems strange, and so does Conor Benn's. And so Ade was wondering whether there's some type of play going on here, whether Conor Benn is basically going deep cover for Matchroom. You know, like the movie Deep Cover, or what's the other movie called? The one that was a remake of, what was it, a Korean movie? The Departed, with Jack Nicholson and Mark Wahlberg. The guy goes deep cover, right? Is Conor Benn going deep cover for Matchroom? Look, anything is possible in this crazy world, and certainly in this crazy sport of boxing. But, and I do get it, Eddie Hearn did come across a little weird. You know, I'm not going to lie. I did as well get a strange vibe from Eddie Hearn in those interviews, especially the first interview that he did with Kugan Cassius. And similar thing with Conor Benn. He's coming across as weird. Conor Benn's normally a very passionate, fiery character, but he's very subdued in these interviews since signing this Zuffa deal. Perhaps it's because of, I don't know, a modicum of guilt. I doubt it, but maybe it's because he wants to play the nice guy. He keeps talking about he's willing to keep Eddie Hearn on as part of the team in some capacity. Eddie Hearn has kind of dismissed that possibility, but we'll see. What do you guys think of this theory, hypothesis, whatever you want to describe it as, that there's some type of play here by Eddie Hearn? He's playing 4D or 5D chess, sending his man Conor Benn in to go deep cover within Dana White's organization. Maybe come back with intel or something and a bag of money. What do you guys think of that? Crassus says Conor isn't bright enough to keep that secret. Yeah, you're probably right. Kylie says, and big up Kylie, Ben hasn't got the intelligence for that. Hannibal Beat says, Hatman, I think there's a real good chance Zuffa get Conor beat. Well, I think that's the idea. According to Zuffa, Dana White, the ethos of their company is going to be very different to traditional boxing promoters who get fighters and coddle them, protect them, try to maneuver them in such a way that they don't get beat for a long time. Whereas in the UFC, okay, they build you up a little bit, but they throw you in a competitive fight a lot sooner. Because ultimately, in the UFC, the brand is bigger than any one fighter. Whereas in boxing, it's the opposite way around. In boxing, the top fighters are bigger as far as names in the world, right, than the actual people that promote them. So in order for your brand to be bigger than the fighters, you're going to have to be known for something. the name of your promotional company is going to have to be synonymous with something that fans gravitate towards. And so Dana White, UFC, Zuffa Boxing want their brands to be synonymous with competitive fights, not the stuff that has been going on in boxing for so long where fighters are coddled and protected and kept away from each other and built up and maneuvered and all this type of stuff. They're supposed to be told who they're going to fight and not have much say about it. Now, there have been some people speculating that Conor Benn might be fighting a big up. Ali, by the way, for the super chat. Come on to your super chat in just a second. I'm just going to finish my thought. There's some speculation that Conor Benn might fight Manny Pacquiao in his Zuffa Boxing debut. Look, it's possible, but if Zuffa Boxing's ethos, if their philosophy is to be taken seriously at all, and I'm not saying that you necessarily should, but if it's to be taken seriously, then that is not the kind of fight that they'll be looking to put Conor Benn in against the 6-year-old Manny Pacquiao? No. For £15 million or dollars on a one-fight deal, presumably they're going to want to throw him in the deep end in a competitive fight. And there's a lot of evidence that they will do that. And I'll show you what the evidence is a little bit later on. So let's just move through some other stuff here. I mean, this was almost inevitable. Eddie Hearn questions if he now believes Conor Benn's innocence with regards to Eggate. I mean, I don't believe that Eddie Hearn was fully convinced of Conor Benn's innocence even when he was still with him. I think Eddie Hearn's behavior was very cynical. The way that Conor Benn tried to circumvent due process the whole time should have alerted Eddie Hearn to the fact that there's something not right here. Why would you try and circumvent due process? He wouldn't present the VADA results, the findings, etc. to the British Boxing Board of Control until many, many months after the fact. Why would he do that? Unbelievable. So Eddie Hearn backed him during that whole time. They tried to say he'd been exonerated because the WBC, who have no ability to determine whether a fighter is allowed to fight or not, he made out as though that was the ultimate ruling. You know, so I never bought the idea that Eddie Hearn truly believed that Conor Benn was innocent 100%. Even if he was relatively convinced, I think there was some element of doubt there all along. But now, of course, after Conor Benn has left him, he's saying, well, I have to question his innocence. He's not the kind of character I thought he was. Now, there are some people saying that Eddie Hearn should release the files. Some people are calling them the Eggstein files or the Eggs files. Eddie Hearn is not at liberty to do that. The only person who's legally at liberty to release those files is Conor Benn. And he hasn't released them. He hasn't shown to the public the reason that he was permitted to get a license again. If it was a good reason and he'd been fully exonerated, completely proven innocent beyond a reasonable doubt, then surely he would have done that. He would have shown us why he was allowed to box again. But if it was a technicality that permitted him to box again, well, you can understand why he wouldn't want to show us that. So yeah, again, more laughable stuff from Eddie Hearn saying, oh, I question his innocence now, basically. Yeah, whatever. You would have questioned his innocence the whole time. Let's be real. Privately. Big up Ali for the super chat. He says, Hatman, I'm live with you on the stream. And good to have you with me. Good to have you with us. Big up Sizzler. Big up Omar. Big up Supersized Fries. He says, better fighter, Gatti or Tio Lopez? For me, definitely Tio Lopez. Yeah, he looked bad against Shakur Stevenson. Shakur Stevenson is a very, very good boxer. So I'm going to say Tio Lopez better than Gatti. Big up Supersized Fries for the super chat. But what do you think? Gatti is legendary in boxing for being in those hellacious fights with Mickey Ward and other hellacious fights. But R.I.P. Arturo Gatti. In my opinion, he was never that great a fighter. Not that Tio Lopez is anything particularly amazing. But can you say that Gatti's got a win on his resume as good as Vasyl Lomachenko? Ben Odom says Eddie should leak the files. All right, let's move on here. We'll come back on to Clonahen. Some of you guys call him. Lee Wood beats Josh Warrington again, this time by wide unanimous decision. I picked Josh Warrington to gain revenge over Lee Wood on points. And that was based on how well Warrington was doing in the first fight up until the moment he got stopped. And also the beating that Lee Wood took at the hands of Anthony Kakachi. I thought both guys were diminished, but Lee Wood might be a bit more diminished. And I thought that might make the difference in the fight. But I was totally wrong. Lee Wood schooled Josh Warrington. Totally outclassed him, outboxed him, stuck a jab on him, moved around, showboated a little bit, had fun in there, made it look easy. And it's a wonder why he didn't do that in the first fight. Maybe he wasn't 100%, or maybe they came up with the wrong strategy. I'm not sure. But in this fight, he comfortably defeated Josh Warrington. Or maybe it's because Warrington is more diminished than I suspected he was going into the fight. I knew he was somewhat diminished. Both guys were, but who was more diminished? That was the question. So, Lee Wood does the business. Should he retire? Should he carry on? Should Josh Warrington retire? What do you guys think? We got Supersized Fries. He says, thoughts on Mayweather returning professional? So, I've heard a lot of rumors about Mayweather. There's this Mike Tyson fight exhibition, which is supposed to be happening in the Congo. But then people are saying, no, Mayweather's coming back for a proper professional fight again. I think Eddie Hearn, and look, Eddie Hearn talks a lot of rubbish, but even a broken clock tells the right time twice a day. I think Eddie Hearn was right over the past, year, 18 months or so, when he kept telling us that Mayweather doesn't have the kind of money that he claims to have. And I think that's quite clear now from the fact that he's going after Showtime and Espinoza, even naming Al Heyman, trying to claw back whatever it is, $300-something million, 10 years after the fact. For him to have his people comb through his finances with a fine-tooth comb to that extent, so many years after the fact, to me, screams of a guy who's having some financial difficulties. Now, obviously, he's still going to have a lot more money than the average Joe, but compared to the money he used to have, and, he lives an extravagant lifestyle, which is extremely money hungry. And sometimes these successful fighters can get to thinking that they can continue spending the way that they were spending when they were fighting. It can just go on forever. They're used to a particular lifestyle. But obviously, Mayweather doesn't make anywhere near as much money now as he did when he was fighting properly. And I think that's why he frequently does these exhibitions. So, yes, I'm convinced now that Mayweather has money problems. And that's why he's doing exhibitions. That's why, in my opinion, he's going after Showtime and Espinoza, potentially Heyman too. And that's why, if he is coming back, That's why he would do that. Double A13 says, did you see Dave Allen? That fight was crazy quick. Literally first punch wobbled the guy. Yes, I did see it. Dave Allen was fighting a pie. You know, he's a big, strong guy, Dave Allen. Swings those right hands over. So, he can knock out pies. He knocked out Johnny Fisher. Poor Johnny Bosch. There you go. Mayweather, 50 strippers on the payroll. I never understood his bizarre obsession with strippers. Used to roll around with a gang of strippers with him. Flying them on a private jet with him. Buying them. I mean, isn't that tricking? I'm using an American term now. That's called tricking. Why would you fly a bunch of strippers around, buying them designer stuff and Louis Vuitton and Chanel bags? Like, why would you do all that for strippers? That's tricking. What kind of tricking is this guy on? Which part of the game is that? When did that become cool? It's like giving a leg up to the lowest form of female life in society, just about. Supersized Fries says, Mayweather said after the Tyson fight, he'll be fighting professionally again. Okay. Money's too tight to mention. All right, let's move on then. So, the main fight last night, Ryan Garcia versus Mario Barrios. Now, let's talk about the positives here for Garcia. He obviously won. He dropped Barrios in the first round within the first few seconds of the fight. He dominated from start to finish. Won just about every round. He showed an improved right hand after the fight. He said that he's been struggling for years with injury issues in his right hand. Somehow, at this stage of his career, he seems to have overcome them, at least for now. It was a right hand that dropped Mario Barrios in the opening moments of the fight, and he used it very well throughout. The left hook was still there, but the right hand was landing and being thrown far more frequently than we're used to. So that was an improvement. He was moving well. He's still a little upright, Ryan Garcia. There's not that much upper body movement, but the lateral movement was good. Fast and snappy. He's always been fast. And he, I guess in the minds of some people, in the opinions of some, put on a clinic. But here's the thing. Mario Barrios, seriously, folks, and this is not me saying it after the fact. I said it after Barrios fought Manny Pacquiao. I said this is one of the weakest welterweight champions I have ever seen in my life. Like Mario Barrios, seriously, folks, Paulie Malignaggi called him garbage. I don't even want to go that far when he has actually won a world title, but you guys can say it for me. Yeah, I want to try and be a little bit respectful because he's a tough guy, but he is so limited. It's unreal. So as much as Ryan Garcia dominated the fight, he did it against Mario Barrios, folks. It's the kind of opponent that could flatter Ryan Garcia a little bit. I'm telling you now, Rolly Romero, who beat Ryan Garcia in an upset, is way better than Mario Barrios. Way better. Barrios, in fact, to hell with it. I'm just going to say, he's trash. He's absolute trash. I was so amazed, and I never rated Barrios to begin with. Like many of you guys, and most people in the boxing industry, I was saying that if Conor Benn is serious about winning a world title, then he needs to forget about the Eubank fights and take on Mario Barrios for the WBC welterweight title, because that's the best opportunity he's ever going to get. He'll never find an easier world champion than that. And by the way, Eddie Hearn is now coming out saying Conor Benn's always been about the money. He didn't want to take the fight against, God, I've forgotten his name all of a sudden. The guy from Northern Ireland, the welterweight champion. What's his name again? Big left hook. I've drawn a blank. Help me out here, folks. Eddie Hearn's fighter who just left. Billy Nelson, his trainer. Lewis Crocker, thank you. So, Eddie Hearn said that Conor Benn was offered the Lewis Crocker fight and he turned it down. He said Conor Benn's all about the money. All about the money, not about titles, legacy, anything like that. He's basically a supercharged version of a gimmick fighter. Yeah, and I said this, it might have been in the run-up to the Eubank Jr. rematch. That's what Conor Benn is turning out to be now, just a gimmick fighter. Rather than being a legit high-level operator or aiming to be that, he's just looking for gimmicks. Like a social media fighter. Chili Beef says, Hatman, who should train Ben now? That's a good question. Will he stay with Tony Sims? Because obviously Tony Sims is in the Matchroom gym. It might be a bit awkward to stay with Sims, but Sims has developed him over the years and he knows him well. We'll see what happens there. Ocean Blue says he turned it down because of the IBF rehydration clause when he fought a walking corpse in Eubank. Yeah, that was certainly, I would imagine, part of the reason. Ryan Emus says, agreed, Hatman. Barrios is just rubbish. People are overpraising Garcia. Yeah. And look, maybe Garcia has improved that much. But we won't be able to tell by looking at that Barrios fight, because Barrios is so trash. Seriously, folks. How in the world? When I was watching that Pacquiao fight, he was being outworked a lot of the time by a 46-year-old man. That's not cool. Barrios is a young fighter. How in the world is a 46-year-old man outworking you? Shocking. A 46-year-old man who'd been out the ring, hadn't had a real fight in many, many years. Big up Sizzler for the super chat. He says, all will be juiced in the Zuffa stable now. That's an interesting bit of speculation or assertion. All will be juiced. I mean, some people are saying that the reason Ryan Garcia looks so improved against Barrios is because he may be back on the juice. Anything's possible, right? But for me, the main thing is just because Barrios is garbage. Shout out to Afro Jam in the live chat. You can see some other action here. For the Garcia Barrios fight, his right hand was in full effect. After the fight, he spoke about Shakur Stevenson, who was in attendance. I don't think Stevenson would have been particularly intimidated by what he saw. But somebody that mentioned Ryan Garcia after the fight is Mr. Conor Benn. Do you guys see this? He posted this on his socials. He said, congratulations, champ. See you later this year. Make sure you keep my belt warm. At Ryan Garcia. This suggests, well, we know that Conor Benn wants to fight, but many people are interpreting this as him basically already having the fight. That is somehow agreed in principle behind the scenes. Ryan Garcia, from what I've heard, was on his last fight with Golden Boy and is now a free agent. If that's true, Ryan Garcia versus Conor Benn incoming. User says Conor Benn is trash. He would lose to Garcia. And here's the thing about the sanctioning, right? So here's the way I understand it, because Jai Opetaia came out recently and was expressing some concern that his IBF title won't be on the line against Brandon Glanton. And so my understanding of it is that the IBF will be able to take a sanctioning fee from Jai Opetaia and therefore allow him to keep his belt in the Glanton fight, but they won't actually sanction the bout. They won't be allowed to attend the bout in any official capacity. So the sanctioning fee won't be to actually sanction anything as far as doing the work. It will just be literally for Opetaia to keep the belt. They won't be allowed to work at the fight in any official capacity. They'll have to buy tickets. They won't be allowed to show the belt in the ring. And with all that apparently being the case, the IBF might just decide to strip him and say, we're not going to put up with that kind of treatment. We're stripping this guy. Ocean Blue says Garcia will scramble those eggs. Galaxy Edit says Ryan destroys Ben. The thing about Ryan Garcia is that he's such an erratic character. He's so erratic. He's so mentally unstable. Can he overcome adversity and succeed? He did in a Luke Campbell fight, but Luke Campbell wasn't exactly an animal in the ring. Which other time has Ryan Garcia in a relatively high-level fight overcome adversity? Like real adversity. He crumbled in the Tank Davis fight. Oh, excuse me, Supersized Fries. He says, Usyk seems to be dragging his feet. Thank you, Supersized Fries, for the super chat. Yeah, Usyk's definitely dragging his feet. He needs to be stripped. As much as I've been bigging Usyk up for the longest time, as I always say on my channel, no fighter is below praise and no fighter is above criticism. Yeah, crying Ryan Garcia. Now, the thing about Conor Benn, in fact, no. Let me just say, make a random comment about Ryan Garcia. Have any of you guys ever suggested or come up with songs that you would like particular fighters to use as their ringwalk music? Because I recently rewatched the Jason Bourne movies. I'm not sure how many of you guys have seen the Jason Bourne movies. Well, the first 3 of them anyway. No, 4 of them. The first one is called The Bourne Identity. The second one is called The Bourne Supremacy. The third one, I think, is The Bourne Ultimatum. I'm not sure what the fourth one is, but I watched the one that's called Jason Bourne. So I watched 4 of them. I'd seen them, years ago. And the theme tune for the Bourne movies is a track by the artist Moby called Extreme Ways. And if you listen to the lyrics in that song, for me, it would be perfect for Ryan Garcia. Any of you guys know the track I'm talking about? It suits Ryan Garcia's chaotic personality in life, Extreme Ways by Moby. I think Ryan Garcia should come out to that. Because some fighters, I really don't understand their choice of ringwalk music. Like, for example, I never understood Chris Eubank Jr.'s choice of ringwalk music, coming out to Still Dre. I mean, it's a classic hip-hop track, but I don't see how it suits him. JR says, yeah, that's a good shout. JR knows the track. User says, did Lomachenko use the Matrix theme? Well, what is the Matrix theme? I've always been a massive fan of the Matrix movies, particularly the first movie. But one of the kind of downsides of the Matrix movies is that they did not have a memorable soundtrack, a memorable score. The visuals were so good, it didn't really matter. The visuals and the concepts and all that. Big up Ben Oldham for the super chat. He says, Endeavor Holdings, TKO Holdings, Dana, Turkey, Paramount, Sky Sports. The writing is on the wall for Matchroom, etc. Every boxer will be on their way to Dana with when their contracts are up, unfortunately. Yeah, I can see the cogs in motion. Even before this Conor Benn signing. From looking at the first 3 or 4 Zuffa boxing shows, I totally disagree with Malignaggi and Eddie Hearn, who've been downplaying how good those shows were. Malignaggi works for ProBox. They're a direct rival, right? When I say that the matchmaking was good, particularly on the last 2 shows, I mean from an entertainment perspective. If fighters are too well matched, they can cancel each other out. And if they don't have styles that gel, it can turn out to be a boring fight. We see that on Frank Warren shows and Eddie Hearn shows and ProBox TV shows, let's be real. Whereas Dana White's people, for the last 2 shows, managed to pick fighters whose styles gelled very well in order to produce fireworks. Apart from a couple of the fights, it weren't just someone going in there and chinning the opponent without any trouble. It was a fierce back and forth, and then somebody got chinned. And that's what fans want to see. That's what the wider audience want to see. Yes, there's legitimate criticism with there being very few fans in attendance. I also think the production looks a bit dull, a bit bland, but I guess that's the UFC way. They need to jazz it up a little bit. But I can see the potential there. And with the money behind them and the fact that the American boxing promoters are at such a low point now, Dana White's just going to walk in and take over in the United States. I don't see who's going to stop him. And if he takes over in the United States, it's going to put him in a much better position to put pressure on Hearn and Warren and the UK promoters, even the emergence of KSI, right? Misfits Pro. Especially if he gets the Sky deal. Or even a TNT deal. Big up Ben Oldham for the super chat. Yeah, I agree with Kylie. I always liked George Groves' ringwalk music as well. Spitfire by Prodigy. There's one track which I've been waiting for people to use, but nobody that I've ever seen has used it yet. And it's a track from the movie Gangs of New York called Shimmy She Wobble. It's like a track that's played by what they call a pipe and a fife. Is it fife and drum band or drum and fife band, however they word it. And these were, as I understand it, predominantly African-American musicians that had this, or that were very keen on this, down south, they were very keen on this particular genre of music, pipe and drum. It almost sounds like military style music, with the drum and the fife and all that. But yeah, Shimmy She Wobble. I'm waiting for someone to come out to that, because it's very primal, very warlike. You know what I mean? I've always liked that track. Chili Beef says, I just mentioned that earlier in the comments, Hatman. That track needs to be playing. That track needs playing. The fighter needs to start the ring walk from his dressing room. Yeah. Just like in Gangs of New York, It's like a ring walk, innit? That scene in Gangs of New York right at the beginning when they're playing that music. It's literally like a ring walk. And to be fair, obviously I never liked Vladimir Klitschko as a fighter or as a personality really, but his Red Hot Chili Peppers ring walk music was good. It did set the vibe. I mean, in fact, it set a better vibe than the fights were ever entertaining. I mean, it set a better vibe than the fights themselves. Crassus says, Frank has a good enough UK stable to be okay against Dana for now. Who does Eddie have? Dave Allen, Johnny Fisher, Sky Nicholson, all gimmick fighters. Are they going to take on Dana? No. So let me expand on that a little bit more. It isn't just the fact that Eddie Hearn doesn't have much of a UK stable right now. Well, he does have Dalton Smith. And he does have Lewis Crocker. Okay? So, in fact, he's got Dalton Smith, Lewis Crocker. Who's another world champion recently for Eddie Hearn? I'm forgetting somebody. Please, somebody jog my memory in the live chat. Josh Kelly, there you go. Josh Kelly, Lewis Crocker, Dalton Smith. Now, personality-wise, I think there is somewhat of a similarity between Frank Warren and Dana White. Both of them are very bullish, fiery characters, very stubborn, very determined. And the reason they're both like that is because they're self-made men. They got it out the mud. Dana White had to contend with mobsters when he was starting out in the combat sports world. Right, back in Boston. Frank Warren was shot. Frank Warren came out of the underworld doing unlicensed boxing. So, both of those guys would never have made it if they didn't have that kind of ferocious spirit. They'd never have made it to the level that they're at. We know that they can both overcome adversity. They're just built like that. Eddie Hearn, because he was given a business, because he was raised with a silver spoon, he's never had to show that level of determination. Does it mean he doesn't have it? Well, I guess we're going to find out. He certainly never had to show it. He's never needed it. Eddie Hearn has been in his soft girl era his whole life. Eddie's been in his soft girl era his whole life. So when the going gets tough, can he really go head to head with a guy like Dana? With all that money. See, The reason he was able to compete with Frank Warren for so long is because he had that Sky deal. And Warren was out in the cold, scraping a living on Box Nation. But once Frank Warren got back on a major station, it weren't too long before he surpassed Eddie again, at least in the heavyweight division. King James says Eddie woke up one morning and the Mercedes was in the garage, so he had to take a Mondeo taxi to school. He was horrified. Yeah, man, soft girl era. Is Eddie Hearn war ready? Is he built for this with Dana White? You guys let me know what you think. Ocean Blue says probably has his pajamas dry cleaned. He probably wears a new pair of pajamas every night. Flown in from Italy, you know? So Nabasage L. Moore says Hearn is fine. He still has Bam, Shakur, Crocker, Kelly, Hitchens. Ben is a high-value gimmick like Fisher. Well, I think you're kind of missing the point, respectfully. Boxing is a business. So it doesn't matter how credentialed your fighters are. If they're not big ticket sellers, if they're not big pay-per-view sellers, then you're going to have problems if your rivals do have big ticket sellers. It's like when Eddie Hearn signed Andy Cruz years ago. And I was saying at the time that Matchroom are on the decline. And there were all these Matchroom fans who were saying, what are you talking about, Hatman? He just signed Andy Cruz, Olympic gold medalist. And I said to them, are you mad or what? Andy Cruz, no one in the wider public is going to give a damn about Andy Cruz. Just being real. Well, you think he's going to make a load of money for Eddie Hearn? Give it a rest. Now, okay, some of the fighters that Eddie Hearn has might sell a few tickets. Shakur's definitely, but Shakur's not an Eddie Hearn fighter, by the way. Shakur's a free agent. He's working with Eddie on a fight-by-fight basis, so, you know, he could go any day. He's not locked in. Bam has recently been having offers from Zuffa Boxing. So that relationship is on the rocks. Because Robert Garcia was acting like they might actually go to Zuffa. And as for the others, I mean, Crocker, guess he sells a few tickets in Northern Ireland. Although Eddie Hearn didn't even bother to win the purse bid. He's got to go and fight Liam Paro in Australia. And I think he's going to lose that fight, by the way. But we'll see. Josh Kelly, okay, he's got a bit of a following in the Northeast, but he's not a massive star, is he? Richardson Hitchens, they're still trying to build him. The only one who Eddie Hearn actually has signed to a long-term deal that has the potential maybe to be a big star and commercial draw is Boots Ennis. Other than that, who's Eddie Hearn got? What, AJ? AJ's on his last legs. Okay, yeah, did forget about Ben Whittaker, but how good is Ben Whittaker? How long can they keep that going? People are saying Bam re-signed. How long did he re-sign for? Somebody sarcastically mentioned Galal Yafai. I think they were being sarcastic. A big up. I think it was Eldon Joe. Big up Eldon Joe. Yeah, but the thing about Ben Whittaker, right? Galaxy Edit says Whittaker is special in my opinion. He also has got Dimitri Bivol. Have you seen the size of Bivol these days? I'm not sure Bivol could make cruiserweight at the moment. I mean, he's massive. Have you seen him? At the Ring Magazine Awards, I've never seen Bivol like that before in my life. And as far as Ben Whittaker, I saw a little mini documentary about Ben Whittaker and he's spending some time in America, sightseeing in New York City. And we were talking about corny people the other day. Ben Whittaker comes across as really corny to me. I like his showboating in the ring, but outside the ring, when he opens his mouth and he's interacting with, he just seems so corny. And that doesn't mean he can't be a good fighter, but he just strikes me as a bit of a pretender. And yeah, he's flashy, he's athletic and all that, but I need more convincing that he has what it takes at the top level in boxing. Because you need more than athleticism. You're actually going to need some grit. You're going to need some toughness. Big up Luca for the super chat. He says, Eddie would have been king if he went to Netflix. But was that opportunity on the table? That's the question. Ben Oldham says, Ben is a soft, nice guy. Yeah, even Ben Whittaker comes across like he's in his soft girl era. You know, Ben Whittaker, excuse me, frog in my throat. Ben Whittaker's one of these light-skinned guys who really leans into the pretty boy thing. And apart from David Hay, you know, he was a light-skinned pretty boy guy that was actually tough. I'm always skeptical about those types, you know. Always skeptical. Because your appearance is a projection of your personality, you know? So when there's a light-skinned fighter, I want to see Fabio Wardley. You know, shaved head. Looks like some kind of character out of the Queen Vic and EastEnders. But when you get these light-skinned guys that lean into the pretty boy stuff, are they really cut out for boxing? I'm gonna throw Anthony Yard in there as well. Like, Yard is tough as in he can take a bit of a beating, right? He's brave. But when he comes up against really strong-willed fighters, he crumbles. Do you know what I mean? It's like he's in too much of a pretty boy mindset. He's coming into the ring with all these complicated hairstyles. He probably had to sit down for 7 hours to get his hair done. Like, what kind of mentality is that for a fighter? So, I don't know, man. Yeah, I'm not saying that light-skinned guys can't fight. I'm not saying that at all. There are plenty of light-skinned guys who can fight. I'm talking about the fact that there's, you know, the kind of light-skinned guys I'm talking about. Yeah? They always grow their hair out and always trying to look super groomed and all that kind of business. Like, are they really cut out for fighting? I don't know. Dr. Wu says genuine types. Yeah. And again, David Haye looked like genuine back in the days. But David Haye was tough. David Haye was that light-skinned pretty boy who would actually turn your lights out. He was someone you could underestimate at your peril. Look at the way he twists up Derek Chisora and Don Charles single-handedly. They're a hardback African man. Twists them both up by himself. Crazy. Yeah, David was the real deal. He was about that action. Yo. The way he twists up them two hardback African man was ugly. Well, yeah, Ali was tough, and he kept calling himself pretty, but Ali wasn't the kind of pretty boy I'm talking about. Yeah, Ali wasn't like overly manicured, and do you know what I mean? He weren't like that. It weren't really a thing back then. But in the modern world, these overly manicured men with complicated hairstyles and, do you know what I mean? Overly groomed. JR says, I miss David Haye. John Boy says Spence has a fancy hairstyle these days, does he? Not seen Spence for a minute. That's right, King James. Chisora really stepped to him like he was sweet. Got dropped in and out of the ring. That's right. Got twist up like a pretzel. Yeah, the thing about Conor Benn, now, he's not a typical light-skinned pretty boy. Conor Benn, even though he tries to, you know, I don't know what he actually tries to do. He looks weird. Bleach blonde hair, and he's just very weird. But he has his dad's spirit. And his dad was a ferocious fighter. And Conor Benn, I'm sure, isn't as good as his dad, but he does have that same ferocious spirit. I'll give him that. He is ferocious. When he actually gets in the ring to fight somebody, he's ferocious. There's definitely nothing sweet there. I mean, you could see that from the Cedric Payno fight when he was dropped, the first fight, when he was dropped a bunch of times. Came roaring back and won the fight. So, as much as Conor Benn is an obnoxious individual, he's tough. Ben Odom says Conor is a wannabe Caucasian East End gangster. Well, he is half white, so, it's half of his heritage, isn't it? Can't blame him for that. Well, acting white, quote unquote, I can't blame him for that, but yeah, he's got that whole Essex tough guy persona that he projects. Now, I like the way Atama comes across. He's stoic. Okay, he's not the greatest interview in the world, but he's all business. There's no complicated hairstyles or, too many model photo shoots or anything like that. Atama comes across like one of the man them. Not from my generation, but today's generation. Looks like somebody that will be hanging around, on push bikes, BMX bikes, e-scooters. That's how Atama comes across. He talks like that. His demeanor is like that. Hanging around with a man them on the street. Bunning zoots. Up to no good. Yeah, Moses is from Kent, but as I understand it, the part of Kent he comes from, Chatham, is apparently really kind of a depressed town. I don't know anything about it, but when I was talking about Moses Atama in a previous stream some months ago, people were telling me actually Chatham is an ish hole. It's not some nice sunny seaside town. It's like a dive or whatever. So if you don't want to say he's one of the man them, you could say he's a bit chavvy. Atama comes across as a bit chavvy. Mark Hatch says, Hatman, that action star line is in my head now. It's been in my head for a good few days. Hilarious. Tony S says, what do you think of Gary Antoine Russell versus Hirooka? I didn't actually watch the fight. I only saw the highlights, but it looked like a very close one. East Midlands Fight Fan says Chatham is rough. Summers Boxing disagrees. He says Chatham's not that bad. I got no idea. I've never been there, but there are a lot of seaside towns in Britain that are kind of, how can I describe them? Run down. They might not necessarily be gangland. Do you know what I mean? Where there's a load of gang warfare and bodies dropping, all that kind of stuff. But they are economically depressed. There's a lot of seaside towns like that in the UK, where there's junkies and it's all very grey and depressing. A lot of vandalism and theft, stuff like that. There's a lot of seaside towns in the UK like that, especially in the north. I know Chatham's in the south, but particularly in the north, loads of just run-down seaside towns. Yeah, backwaters. Trashy, that's a good name to describe them. Double A 13 says Chatham is rough, seen worse, but definitely rough. Yeah, a lot of those rundown seaside towns in the south are full of Eastern Europeans now. A lot of Eastern Europeans in those places, Albanians and people like that. Yeah, Blackpool's always been trashy, at least in my lifetime. It's always been trashy there. But as trashy seaside towns in Britain go, Blackpool is obviously one of the more successful ones because of the pleasure beach and all that. Muscle Factory says, favorite commentary line of all time. Oh, there are so many. I like Gary Mason's line when Holyfield knocked out Buster Douglas. Gary Mason just simply said, "It's a very good shot. He's done him." That always sticks in my mind for some reason. It's a very good shot. He's done him. Or some of them from the HBO crew. I mean, with Manny Steward, some of them weren't even lines. They were just screams. In fact, yeah, when Victor Ortiz dropped Berto, might have been in the 6th or 7th round. It was like a back and forth round. And Manny Steward was like, he screamed, "Oh my God!" like that. That was funny. Yeah, JR's mentioned it. Oh my God. Manny Stewart used to get so into the fights. It was very entertaining. You got Charles B in the chat. Yep, down goes Johnny. Ben Odom says, "Oh, that's controversial." I remember Lennox Lewis saying that at the end of the first Mike Tyson-Razor Ruddock fight. But he pronounced it controversial. I think some Americans pronounce it that way. Obviously, Lewis, from the age of 12, was raised in Canada. But yeah. No, actually, no, it was Ian Dark that first said it. "Oh, that was controversial." And then Lewis followed up by saying, "Definitely controversial." Oh yeah, Jimmy Nail. Yeah, when Julian Jackson got ironed out. When Harold Graham got ironed out by Julian Jackson. Oh no! I quite liked a lot of Jim Lampley's ridiculousness. You know, when Manny Pacquiao was fighting, Lampley would be like, "Bang, bang, bang, bang." And I say like bang 5 or 6 times in a row. Another good Lampley line was when George Foreman knocked out Michael Moorer. "It happened. It happened." Big up Ben Odom for the super chat. He says, "Who remembers years ago when Conor pooed his pants on seeing a spider? IFL TV interview of Nigel and Conor. I don't remember that." But to be fair, were they in Australia? Because you got deadly spiders in Australia. You can't mess about. Oh, in the UK, says Ben Odom. All right. Hannibal Beat says, Dana wouldn't let Jim come do commentary. To be fair, Jim is washed now. He doesn't flow on the microphone anymore. Very janky. KD versus the World says Max Kellerman is awful. Omar says, my biggest fear when I go to Africa is rabies. Okay. The treatment for rabies is pretty good these days. So unless you're in some type of rural area, even if you did get it, you should be okay. They don't do the, as I understand it, the jabs to the solar plexus anymore, where they had to strap you down and use a huge needle and jab the antidote directly into your liver or stomach or something. They used to do that back in the days it was so painful they literally had to strap you down. But as I understand it these days, they don't do that anymore. It's just like in the arm or something. Ben Odom says Max's hands are shaking these days. He's not well. Oh, they have not noticed that. Where's Carlos says rabies has a 98% mortality rate. Yeah, if untreated, it does. If you get treated, the survival rate is very high. Supersized Fries says it's been a shot in the arm since like the 80s. Is that right? Because I remember even in cartoons back in the days, when somebody had to have a rabies shot, it'd be like in the stomach and it'd strap him down. And I was always told that by my parents growing up. Like, you get rabies, you got to have a shot in the stomach. Awful. I remember when they built the Channel Tunnel, there was all this fear that rabies could re-enter Britain, because rabies had been eradicated from Britain for decades, or was it centuries? I'm not sure. And they did actually discover a couple of rabid animals after the building of the Channel Tunnel. I think there was a rabid bat found somewhere in Britain. They might have bitten someone. Kylie says, just stay away from raccoons and crazy looking squirrels. Well, malaria medication is known, whether you bun weed or not, certain malaria medication is known for having bizarre dreams. There's a particular type of antibiotic that they often prescribe for malaria, which will give you the most bizarre dreams, well, basically nightmares. Very, very vivid nightmares. Ayad says the tunnel caused that. Well, it was speculated that the tunnel caused it. It was speculated. No, I don't smoke the lettuce. I haven't smoked. And I never used to regularly smoke, but once in a blue moon when I was a kid. Do I like or own dogs? No, I don't own dogs. I don't have the time or the patience to be owning dogs. I need somebody to keep them for me and only use them as security. AA13 says, Bob Arum is one of a kind. How's he that much of a soldier in his mid-90s? Yeah, he's been going a long time, but I think his time is almost up. What do I do in my spare time when I'm not making videos? I work. The vast majority of my time is taken up working. But when I do have spare time, what do? Just the usual stuff. Go to restaurants, meet people. I like going to historical sites. Go on trips, holidays. The usual things that middle-aged men like to do. Nothing loud or too raucous. I ain't about that life. Ayad says, I reckon Zuffa might try to buy Top Rank. They might, but would would Bob Arum sell it to them, given their history? We'll see. It's not like Bob Arum needs the money. So he might just stubbornly say, no, I ain't selling it to you guys. You're my enemy. Omar says, when I discovered your channel, I thought you were in your late 20s or early 30s. If only. Callie says, working is what keeps Bob alive. Yeah. If you don't stay busy at that age, you start to go into cognitive decline. Well, you're going to go into cognitive decline probably anyway, but a lot more rapidly if you're not busy, if you're not keeping your mind engaged. AA13 says, Hatman, how often do you visit London nowadays? Well, I've got no reason to visit London. Gino says, how will Brits take to Zuffa though? It's a good question because the boxing culture in Britain is a bit different to the United States. Dr. Wu says, spot on, Hatman, beware of early retirement. I mean, I was working years ago in a security job, a very easy security job, a cushy security job, with a load of pensioners, or not pensioners, obviously, because they were still working, but near pensioners, guys that were in their 60s. Yeah, there was a load of guys in that particular job that were in their early 60s, so they were close to retirement age. And several of them, after they retired, were brown bread within a year. Can you imagine? They literally worked their whole lives, and they looked. I mean, one of them was called Marvin. He was a Jamaican guy, and he was in his early 60s when I worked with him, and he was fit as a fiddle. But within a year of retirement, he was pushing up daisies. It's like that job was literally keeping him alive. Do I believe in having relationships with people who don't provide you with anything other than happiness? Hell yeah. But the question is it possible for someone to provide you with happiness if all they bring is some vibes and banter? Or do they need to bring something more substantial than that to actually give you happiness? It all depends on the individual. Omar says, have you ever tried samosas? I guess you mean samosas, obviously. I'm not a Philistine, bro. I like food, you know? I like trying different foods from different cultures and what have you. Exploring different cuisines. Been like that my whole life. I love Asian food. By Asian, I'm talking about, you know, the Indian subcontinent. Katie says Thai food. Thai food is cool, but I've never really fallen in love with it. I personally prefer, Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi food myself, rather than food from the Far East. Omar says smash burgers or pizza. I'll probably go with smash burgers. When it comes to pizza, I like Neapolitan style pizza. That's my favorite type of pizza, Neapolitan style, rather than the other styles that are out there. I like a simple Neapolitan style margarita. When done well, it's elite. Big up AA13. Have a good one. Senor Carl says Singaporean and Malaysian cuisine is very good. Summers Boxing says Domino's can't be beaten. I'm not sure about that. Domino's is okay, but there's plenty of pizza I prefer over Domino's. Yes, Sizzler. The tomato sauce makes it on those Neapolitans and the wood fire thin ones. Yeah, that's the ones I'm talking about, where they put the... What kind of cheese is it that they put on those Neapolitan pizzas? What's the name of that cheese? They put like big chunks of it on the cheese, on the pizza. Yeah, mozzarella. They put like a few chunks of mozzarella, a bit of basil. The tomato sauce has to be nice and tangy. Very thin crust. Cooked very quickly. Bellissimo. Have I seen the Ilomba in Africa yet? I haven't. But I'll be keeping an eye out for it. Yeah, buffalo mozzarella. That's right. Buffalo mozzarella. That's the one in the big chunks that they put on. Yeah, I like that one. Yeah, I spoke about that earlier on, Ayed. I did see Opetai's interview, and he seemed clueless about what's going on, whether he's going to be able to keep his IBF belt. Opetai to me comes across like a guy who doesn't really know anything other than being a warrior. I don't think there's that much, respectfully, going on in his head. I think he's just a member of the human species that was put here by nature to be a fighter. That was the purpose that nature created him for. Like with bees or ants, they have particular roles, worker ants and drones and all that kind of stuff. I think it might be possible that certain human beings are also put here on Earth within the human species to fulfill a particular role. And I think Jai Opetaia was just put here to be a fighter, a warrior, in whatever capacity. I don't think, again, maybe this is mad disrespectful, but the way he comes across to me, it doesn't seem like he serves much more of a purpose than that. He seems clueless about business, you know? He just wants to fight. Muscle Factory says he doesn't rate Opetaya because the Breeders fights were too close. Yeah, I don't really get that argument. Because Breeders gave Usyk one of his closest ever fights. So I don't really get that argument. Breeders was still very useful when he fought Opetaya, particularly the first time. Opetaya took his title, so I'm not sure why Opetaya was supposed to smoke Breeders. Like, who's ever smoked him? Kassar says, fresh mozzarella is pretty much only in Naples and is very, very good. Yeah, the thing that is emphasized in places like Italy, Greece, France, southern France in particular, the south, is the freshness of ingredients. They emphasize that a lot more than they do in places like Britain. Obviously, it's got the climate to facilitate fresh food more so than Britain does in the winter and what have you. And when you go somewhere where the food is just absolutely fresh, all the vegetables, the herbs, everything is totally fresh all the time, trust me, you can taste the difference. Yeah, if we can get these likes up to at least 90 or 80, let's call it 80. We've got 67 at the moment. If everyone can stick a like on this stream, it'll be much appreciated. Thank you in advance. Yeah, Opetaya has been getting rocked. He definitely doesn't have an iron jaw, but he comes back, he recovers. Luke Partridge got rocked plenty of times, and he turned out to be a pretty good heavyweight, right? So it's not the end of the world if you get rocked, as long as you come back and win. And so far he's won. I mean, he got his jaw broken in the first Breeders fight, and Breeders was a mega puncher. Breeders knocked heavyweight Manuel Char out cold with one punch, uppercut. Broke Opetaya's jaw early, and Opetaya went the distance and won the fight and shipped more punishment along the way. Opetaya is tough. Now, it's possible that there's wear and tear developing there, wearing down the punch resistance. Maybe he's starting to struggle at the weight as well, because it does get harder making weight the older you get. I think Opetaya's over 30 now, isn't he? So maybe that could be contributing to why he's getting hurt more in fights. Ayad says Partridge is going to sign with Zuffa, I think. That's an interesting take. What makes you think that? Well, there have been many great fighters over the years that were a little vulnerable. To name a couple of them, Tommy Hearns. Hearns was always vulnerable, but he was always a tremendous fighter. Great fighter, truly an all-time great. So I don't think being a little vulnerable precludes you from being great at all. If your offense is formidable enough and you have the skills, you can still be a great fighter even with vulnerabilities. Tommy Hearns was certainly great. Nigel Benn, not as great as Tommy Hearns, but Nigel Benn, again, another vulnerable fighter, but a legend of British boxing. Took down Gerald McClellan, who was anything but vulnerable as far as punch resistance. Gerald McClellan had one of the best chins I've seen. And it was a tremendous puncher. Nigel Benn, who was always a little suspect as far as punch resistance, he went up against McClellan. And obviously that fight ended in tragedy, but you get the point. It isn't the end of the world if a fighter doesn't have an iron jaw. Necessarily. That's right, Hannibal Beats. Keith Connolly has been a massive thorn in Eddie Hearn's side, or Eddie Hearn's butt lately, for sure. Okay, Ayad says, I just got a feeling, especially Frank Warren's recent tweet seems to be a bit like a plea to stay. Okay, I'll have to have a look at that tweet. What did the tweet say? Would I rather have Julian Jackson's right hand or Wilder's right hand? I'd say Wilder's right hand. Max says Joe Joyce best chin easily. No way. Hrgovic has got a better chin than Joe Joyce. Okay, that's an interesting take. Ayed says, I think DAZN pulled that Hitchens fight to punish Connolly. It's plausible. Yeah, in terms of historic heavyweights, Oliver McCall had one of the best chins of all time, yeah. But as far as heavyweights today, Hrgovic got a better chin than Joe Joyce. Those shots from Zhang that knocked Joe Joyce out, Hrgovic took those and went the distance. The shots that knocked Anthony Joshua out, AJ's never been known for a great chin, but, you know, the shots that flatlined AJ against Dubois, Hrgovic took those on the chin and never came close to going down. He was stopped on cuts. People forget that. Yeah, Dave Allen's got a tremendous chin as well. That's true. Dave Allen's got one of the best chins in the division, for sure. Yep. Allen's got a very, very good chin. So Hannibal Beat says, nah, in my opinion, a lot of fighters were sick on that card. Barrios was sneezing, had tissue in his hands at the glove selection, and Hitchens seemed like he doesn't need much to pull out of a fight. Yeah, actually, Sean Porter was saying the same. Because I saw Sean Porter interviewed at that show, and he said there is something going around. Yeah, Big Baby Miller's got a great chin as well. We got President Brush for the super chat. He says, it's true that Frank tweet was random. Can anybody tell me what the tweet actually said? Has it since been deleted? Let me try and look it up. Was it from the Frank Warren account or the Queensbury account? So WPW says Ade said it was cold when he got to Vegas. He was expecting it to be warm. He only brought shorts. Did he arrive at night? Because Vegas can be quite chilly at night. It's in the middle of the desert at the end of the day. Tony S says that Ukrainian journeyman who fought Atama has a tremendous chin. I think the guy's called Dovyachenko. Yeah, he's very tough. Big up Supersized Fries. He says, Jai met Benavidez and he looks a lot bigger. Who looks bigger? Jai or Benavidez? Oh, Jai, okay. Well, Benavidez doesn't have very wide shoulders, does he? He's got like narrow shoulders. He's got this weird skinny fat type of physique. Very short torso. Kind of narrow shoulders. Hannibal Beat says, yeah, Hatman, that Frank tweet seems kind of weird. President Brush says, Frank Warren tweeted a Fury admiration post on his Twitter. So I guess you guys are saying he was pandering to Fury's ego in the hope that he extends, re-signs, whatever. I guess that's the idea. Gino says Lewis actually had a good chin considering those Briggs and Mercer fights were tough. Yeah, Lewis was mischaracterized during his career by the American media and boxing fraternity as being a chinny Brit. But if he was that chinny, he'd never have made it through. As you say, the Shannon Briggs fight, the Vitaly Klitschko fight, the Ray Mercer fight, the Frank Bruno fight. It's heavyweight boxing. You know, he was caught perfectly by Oliver McCall and by Hasim Ratman. I mean, they were absolute 1 in a million type punches. He was just caught on the sweet spot with full power. With the Oliver McCall one, he was launching his own right hand and basically walked into McCall's right hand. So it was like double impact, you know? And with Hasim Ratman, one, he was fatigued because he was overweight and the fight was at altitude and he hadn't, you know, been filming Ocean's 11 with Klitschko and hadn't been taking the fight anywhere near seriously enough. And so I think that contributed to the knockout as well as the best right hand I've ever seen Hasim Ratman land. Bang on the chin. Lewis's chin was in, I mean, just a perfect shot. But in other fights, he took big shots on the chin and didn't go anywhere. Remember, the Klitschko fight was after that. A couple of fights after that. He was taking also, and not like Klitschko was a massive one-punch knockout artist. Vitaly Klitschko I'm talking about. He wasn't, but he still could get people out of there. You know, he got plenty of people out of there at a high KO ratio. He hit Lewis on the chin plenty of times clean. Lewis didn't go anywhere, as did Ray Mercer, as did Frank Bruno. So yeah, Lewis's chin wasn't that bad. I would say it was kind of a slightly above average chin. Maybe average, slightly above average. It certainly wasn't a glass jaw the way he was characterized or mischaracterized during his career. Ocean Blue says, who's Tyson Fury? Sorry, Luke Partridge. Let's get his name right. Yeah, Turkey and Oscar have been standoffish for a long time. A long time. I think they were never really on good terms from the beginning, to be honest. So they've always had a frosty relationship. Turkey actually fired a little bit of a shot at De La Hoya last year sometime, was it? He kind of swiped at De La Hoya at a press conference and said, Oscar wastes my time with that question, and he appeared to get kind of angry when talking about De La Hoya. Genius says, favorite commentary line are, legs are shaky, Adam. The famous Matthew Macklin. And bang on the chin. That's Jim Watt. Yeah, I saw the way Oscar and Turkey were sat last night. It's as if someone had parted the Red Sea. Like a huge gap between them, even though they were sat next to each other. There was a big gap. Yeah, that was funny. Callie says, I found it comical when Oscar told Eddie to stop crying over Ben when he had a mental breakdown over Canelo. He was literally like a Canelo stan for years. So it's pretty ridiculous what Oscar's saying now. Stop crying. I mean, he was crying for the longest time over Canelo. Yep, Tony S. Hard right hand. Jim Lampley, yep. And it is ridiculous, you know, going back to Eddie Hearn and Conor Benn, loyalty, all this type of stuff. It's ridiculous for promoters to talk about loyalty. Because once a fighter is no longer selling tickets and making money, where's the loyalty from the promoter? It's nowhere to be seen. Fighters like Scott Quigg and others have come out over the years and said that Eddie stops picking up their calls once they lost a couple fights. Certainly stopped calling them. So with these promoters, it's like loyalty is supposed to be a one-way street in their head. The fighter's supposed to be loyal to the promoter, but the promoter, well, he doesn't owe the same thing to the fighter. Like, give it a rest. Okay, you could say that Eddie was loyal to Conor, but why? Out of the goodness of his heart? No. Because he could see that Conor was a commercial commodity. If Conor never sold any tickets, you really think Eddie Hearn would have taken all those bullets for him? Like, come on. Yeah, but he stuck by Conor because he believed he could make money out of him down the line. That's why he stuck by him. Let's say it was somebody that's not a ticket seller, that doesn't have a famous surname, and they were in Conor Benn's position. You think he would have lent them hundreds of thousands of pounds? Hell no. Eddie Hearn obviously saw it as an investment. The Hearns don't give money out for free. Look at all the purse bids they lose. Lewis Crocker's got to go fight in Australia because Eddie Hearn wouldn't bid the extra. What was it? 50 grand, 100 grand? That's chicken change to Eddie Hearn. Wouldn't do it. Let Lewis Crocker, who's the champion, go over and defend his title in Australia. That's diabolical. Because if you understand the way that purse bids work, that fight went to a purse bid, the champion gets 70% at least. So what that means is Eddie Hearn gets a much bigger percentage than Liam Parrow's promoter does. So you're in an advantageous position when you're promoting the champion in a purse bid scenario. So for Eddie Hearn to lose that purse bid and have Crocker go fighting, well, that's diabolical. Oh, wow, it was 20 grand. 20 grand? Dear, oh dear. 20 grand. Is that all it was? That's a lunch to Eddie Hearn. That's a quick afternoon trip to Harrods. Crazy. Goozy said, Eddie had matching rights for Ben. That story hasn't been told yet. Why didn't Eddie match Zuffa's bid? Well, that's what Dana White said yesterday. He said Eddie Hearn could have matched the offer. It's not a bid. It was an offer. Eddie Hearn could have matched the offer, but chose not to. That's what Dana White is claiming. Yeah, we spoke about the Dana White stuff earlier on in the stream. I'll get the screenshot up here. Where is it at? Yeah, there it is. You can see the headline there. Eddie Hearn is the biggest in the world. The gloves are off. Playtime is over. Eddie Hearn just caught a bloody nose. He got knocked down. Does he have the heart to get up and fight back? Or isn't he built like that? Because Dana White got it up out the mud. He's self-made. He weren't born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He wouldn't be where he is today without having a ferocious fighting spirit inside him. In a business sense, you understand. Eddie Hearn was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. As I said earlier on, Hearn's been in his soft girl era his whole life. So if he does have the kind of resolve that Dana White has, he hasn't had to show it yet. It remains to be seen whether it's actually there. Goozy says, Eddie says Conor never took his call. Maybe he wanted to put his offer in. Yeah, maybe he did. But there would have been nothing stopping him from putting his offer in through email or text. Shout out to William Smith for the super chat. Much appreciated, sir. Hope you're having a good one. We got President Brush. He says, do you see a comeback strategy for Matchroom, or will it be a slow death? I don't see how they can beat Turkey in the long run. Well, it all depends on how profitable this Zuffa boxing venture turns out to be. Because ultimately, I do think the Saudis want to make a profit in the long run. Because they're trying to diversify, I spoke about this in the previous stream, they're trying to diversify their economy away from natural resources like oil. They've looked at their neighbors in the UAE and they've thought, well, we need to do that. This oil ain't going to last forever. So they're heavily invested in Western sports. But yeah, I think it's really contingent on how long Turkey stays in the sport of boxing. And that's contingent on whether it's profitable, whether he thinks it's going to be profitable, or the Saudi investment fund think it's going to be profitable long term. We'll see. We got President Brush for the super chat. William Smith says, I find it funny how Matchroom criticized UFC for paying fighters so little. Take a look at how much their darts and snooker players get. Well, I have no idea, but what I can say, to be fair, is you don't put your health on the line playing darts or snooker. Boxing is a hazardous sport, so there's an aspect of hazard pay maybe, right? You can make that argument. But there's no doubt that the Hearns are hypocrites. So I'm with you on that. But so is Dana White. I mean, I struggle to think of a combat sports promoter that isn't a hypocrite. It's always rules for thee, but not for me. And I'm not sure how well this 8 weight division thing is going to work in boxing. Because that's going to leave loads of fighters out in the cold, and they're going to need to be catered for. And they are catered for right now by the existing boxing establishment and the existing sanctioning bodies. So there's like a huge loophole right there in the Zuffa boxing business model that will allow the current boxing establishment to continue existing, potentially thriving, right? Yeah, when MMA first started, or at least when the UFC first started, there were no weight classes. Literally none. Any of you guys seen UFC 1? In the final, it was like Emmanuel Yarbrough, this giant black sumo wrestler, going up against the guy called Keith Hackney. It was like literally less than half his size. No weight classes when UFC first started out. So they had basically a blank canvas. With boxing, there's no such thing. There is no blank canvas. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this 8 weight class thing works. All right, peeps, I'm going to wind this one down. I would like to thank each and every one of you for joining this conversation. As always, a special shout out to those who donated via Super Chat. They were Ali, Supersized Fries, Sizzler, Ben Odom, Luca, President Brush, William Smith. Yeah, I think I got them all. So, shout out to everyone. Special shout out, should I say, who donated via Super Chat. Big up everyone else who joined in the conversation. Until next time, take care. Be good. I'll catch you on the other side. I'm out.